Beat 2, 3, 4. Niko, what is up?
What's going on, John? SDH family. Excited to be here. Cub numero dos right here in the Pacific Northwest. Nice, sunny, yet chilly morning. But, man, with lots to talk about, we're going into another big weekend in MLS. There has been a bunch of friendlies. There's some already field to Copa America here in the States. So, lots to talk about, man.
All right, well, let me start with what happened up in the Northwest with you and a conversation that you had, that the group had with Brian Schmetzer. And who posed the question, or was it volunteered by Brian, about his future and him being on the touchline and his answer? How did all of that come together?
That's a great point of conversation. That has been something that we've asked maybe less directly. Actually, in the last few seasons, we've asked Brian if he felt in the hot seat, if he thought that, his job was in jeopardy. And it was my question. I took it to the next level because I felt like it was necessary. It was a fair question, and he answered it great. To be quite honest, he was very transparent. I thought he was genuine with his answer, and he basically said that the only way he would step down as head coach, it would be if he felt like the team quit on him, and he was very open about understanding why that question is put out there, why fans might think that, why media might think that, why it's a point of conversation. And it's the reality of this team. I can tell you that I have been following Brian Schmetzer for a very long time. I respect everything he's done. I've praised him. I've, been one of his biggest supporters when people kind of went on the rage that he wasn't necessarily a coach that was the brightest guy when it came to strategy, and that there were so many better coaches out there. And, he's proved that his module, the module that he kind of starts talking about this whole subject, because he's asked a prior question where he talks about, he likes to motivate guys, and sometimes you motivate one guy and not another one. And he feels like right now in this specific group of players, he's still trying to find a way to motivate every single player in that locker room. But to me, halfway through the season, when you still haven't been able to find that, haven't gauged that, haven't been able to maybe get this team to play at its highest potential, per his own words, when after post games is the exact same answer to why they're losing games, why you're dropping points, why you're drawing games late, why you can't hold leads. That, to me, starts to become a question about the system, about maybe even the trust from players to the tactics and the concepts. The way I phrase the question is that in soccer, and I've said this here, I said this in every show usually when it comes to a coach being at one club for a very long time, there is a theory, there is a notion that there is a point in a coach's tenure where his thought process, where his messaging just doesn't get across anymore. Everything kind of becomes white noise to some players, and even training sessions, you start to not feel everything from a specific coach. So I wanted to know if you felt like that's the case here. He was very clear and was very confident that that's not the case at this time, but that's how it all kind of came about. That's kind of the context behind it. That's the context behind the reasoning of the question. And again, I think he fielded that question excellent, and he made fans and those that are doubting this team, even myself, who feels like maybe there is a need or there is a change coming in that directional managerial position, he made me realize that maybe that's not the case. And I'm not taking for his word, and I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that if he was to feel like his messaging wasn't getting across or the team was to quit on him, then he would step away. But for right now, he's going to continue to be the coach until he possibly can. But that's kind of the whole subject in a nutshell.
Because I was going to ask, we see in organizations across all sports where you have a coach, the coach has been there for a long time, and you wonder if the messaging gets stale. And it's up to that coach to either surround yourself with fresher voices, with younger voices, with individuals that they feel can relate to the modern day player in this kind of a situation. You experienced it in that same building with Pete Carroll, I want to say, where the messaging was there, but you would just wonder if that new voice is needed. And American football, yeah, but you're thinking Seattle, is this the case? I mean, and this is a team, Niko, that's only won once in their first 7 matches at home this year, where Lumen used to be a fortress. And I think that might be another thing where the alarm bells are going off with folks.
Yeah, I mean, it's the results. The fact that this is the worst start in franchise history. I've never, since I've been covering this team for, 12 years, have ever seen them without answers. And that's kind of the way it feels, where it's kind of, you almost feel like you're waiting for, it's already spiraling out of control and you're waiting for it just to collapse in front of you. There's obviously nothing that's been reported and I can't say. And actually, every player has been very adamant and almost aggressive, telling media members that the feel of the team is fine, that there's confidence, that there's no leadership problems. One of the other media members has about body language. I don't know if I do too much on body language. In terms of frustration, there are times where body language could be looked at as maybe giving up once you maybe miss a shot or something like that, and your shoulders go down and maybe you're not into the game. But the frustration part, I don't think that's a big deal. But Jordan Morris talked about it yesterday. You could hear in his answers that he's been listening to what maybe narratives have been out there in terms of this team maybe giving up or maybe just not having that fight anymore. And the players have been very straightforward about that not being the case. So at the end of the day, what we're kind of seeing here is that it is fair to ask whether those tactics have gone stale, whether there's a need for something different. And again, it's not all on Brian. The roster build this year just wasn't great. And if you really think about it, since adding Albert Rusnak, there hasn't really been any other player that the Sounders have brought in of a bigger caliber other than Pedro, who might not even see any minutes this year, or he feels that way, right? Brian said that he needs to see him 2 weeks training in full. He didn't even practice in full yesterday. So you start to think about maybe this team is not going to have that X factor or who you thought was going to be that X factor all year long. So it's not just on Brian. There are injuries, there are problems. And again, the basic reasoning behind all of this is that this is the generational change that has been a long time coming. The rebuild's going to completely start next year when Raul and Albert are probably no longer designated players, and the team brings all this new group of players, including all of the new additions to the rules where you can have 3 DPs, 3 U22s, or 2 DPs and 4 U22s. So it's just going to shake things up. And this team is going to have to revamp. And the idea is that they will, because they know that they have a huge responsibility by being in the Club World Cup in 2025. But going back to Brian, going back to what we just talked about, in conclusion, it's a fair conversation. If you are of the belief that Brian feels like he's not on the hot seat, his answers are finally starting to feel like he understands that. And before it was a question, now it's a reality. And now we're going more into the mind of a coach who still believes in his coaching staff still believes in the players and still believes that they can bounce back from their very poor form. And if you look at the standings, you could understand why he could be so optimistic, right? Because the West is quite awful right now. And that's kind of helped Brian, and the fact that maybe they have been in games, right? They have been, he said it, a bunch of players have said it. Well, if we had been able to finish this play or this moment in this game, we'd probably be 6-7 points higher in the standings. And although maybe that is something you can put your hat on, the reality is that when mistakes continue to happen and you continue to drop points, there's no consistency. It's not a reality. It's a fugazi. It's not of matter. As the Wolf of Wall Street movie kind of talked about. That's what it is right now. It's a great theory, and you could be right. But at the end of the day, the reality is what you see in the standings, what you see in results.
Yeah, I mean, right now, Seattle is below the playoff bar, but it's 3 points out, match in hand against Portland. 18 points to Portland's 21. Colorado's at 22. Houston has a better goal difference, and they played one less match, and they're in 7th. So literally you are 5 points out of 6th place, and then you start to get some separation with Vancouver and everybody north of that. But you're 5 points out of 6th in the West, and frankly, a win with a match in hand and working some goal difference getting into the playoff picture. So, I mean, Kefsey in the Twitch pitch is talking about zombie Sounders, which is something that we always talk about here, where they're below the playoff bar and then they hit a run and then they rocket up the standings and finish wherever they stand. So, I mean, is this a possibility of another zombie Sounders run? Can they piece it together, or is this going to be difficult to turn that engine over this year to do that?
I mean, I don't foresee it, and it depends what you think that run could be. If you tell me that run can be playoffs, then sure, they can make the playoffs. If you were saying a zombie season where the Sounders are all of a sudden going to find it, turn it on, and be in the Western Conference Finals, then I'll tell you that's not likely. And that's just my honest answer, right? So nothing has changed from me believing that this team can definitely make the playoffs again. The poor form of the Western Conference help, the fact that you have, some moments of believing that this team can kind of get some wins will make you believe that, yeah, maybe that zombie run will get you to the playoffs, but just no more than that. There's literally no higher expectation than just making the playoffs. And that's been my consistent statement when it comes to this team. And, people were asking why I called the last loss a rock bottom. They hit rock bottom. And that's because, look, going into this game, people were calling it the game of the Walking Dead, right? I mean, it was two teams that needed a win, that they were both in the dumps, that, you could tell that they're just not what they used to be at one point, both for the Kansas City and the Sounders. And the fashion in which you lose that game was just atrocious, right? And you're giving a team that had not won in 10 games a win. It's a game that you started winning, that you started on the front foot. Brian Schmetzer, again, I'm not a coach. I don't pretend to be. I never will. But when Reed Baker-Whiten picks up a yellow and there's an injury that is basically an injury timeout in the, 72nd, 71st minute, my immediate thought was, man, Brian's going to have to change Reed because, he's picked up a yellow. He's probably tired. First game back, first start of the year. He should probably take him out. And then I see Peter Bernice bringing in guys. You could clearly see that Peter's going to bring a guy to go right at Reed Baker-Whiten. And Brian holds him in, keeps him in, and it results in a red card. Was it on the player? Yes, for sure. He's a young player. He's going to learn from that. But it's mainly on the coach. You should have taken him off. Use that time, that injury timeout, to talk to your players. Say, this is what we're going to do. These guys are coming in. React to the play. Because one thing that we talked about in Soccer Bar was the fact that Brian Schmetzer kind of mentioned that he had Reed written down for 75 minutes, and that's the reason why he kept him on. And maybe that just was the answer at the time. He expanded on that this week, but that's not the answer you want to give. If the reason why I didn't take off a player is because I had it planned prior to the game and because it was on my notebook, then I'm not reacting to the game. I'm not watching what's going on. I'm not seeing the players' demeanor and tiredness and again, reacting to what Peter's clearly doing. That's going to be adding fresh legs on that side. Again, I'm not a coach. I'm saying this from my couch and not when the pressure's on, when you're on the bench. But then I also expect one of those 5 assistants to say, hey, Brian, maybe we should take this guy off. So it's all kind of compounding to the point where I felt like this loss was terrible. Then another question I had for him was why he brought in Tino, very young player, first game, coming up from Tacoma Defiance to close the game on that side. Obviously, he had his players back. He said, I believe in them and stuff. But immediately you start thinking, right, oh, he's bringing this guy to close the game, pulls Rusnak out. You're absorbing all this pressure. You're going to 3-man back line, and you're putting 2 young players in Cody Baker and Tino on the same side. And then all of a sudden, that's the lane that gets used for that second goal that kind of puts it all the way for Sporting Kansas City. So there is room for criticism. Brian has not shied away from it. He's taking accountability, and he believes that he can turn it around. Now they go against a very tough, hard Minnesota team, hard to break down, that they're very simplistic, but they're very physical and they're very effective on what they do. Atlanta saw what they can do, just willingly, just moving things around, a very physical back line. So Seattle's going to have to bring it if they're going to want to have a good result on their 50-year anniversary game, by the way, where you have your entire alumni coming down. It's supposed to be a game of celebration. I don't know what the attendance is going to look like, right? They're coming in from a game where they had their lowest attendance since 2009. So what that looks like on Saturday, that apparently might be kind of rainy and crappy, I don't know. So it's going to be interesting to see what the atmosphere is like and what the result at the end of those 90 minutes is.
All right. So now that we are in the final 10 minutes of the segment, I know that we talked a lot about what's going on with Seattle. Now that we talked in the first hour about the U.S. and Brazil after what happened last night, after what happened with the U.S. and Colombia, where Colombia takes them out back and takes out the whooping stick. And reminds them what's going on. Then the U.S. wakes up and they draw Brazil. When you look at this group of friendlies, and I'll leave it as wide open as you want to leave it before we get into cliffhanger, from this group of friendlies that we've seen here in this international window, whether we're talking El Tri, anybody else getting ready for Copa, the U.S. men's national team, what have been some of your highlights in this international break for teams getting ready for either Euro or Copa or whatever? What's stuck in your brain?
Yeah, first of all, I want to kind of use a caveat here that, or a disclaimer that for me, there's no reason why you should overreact to friendlies, right? I understand that the 5-1 loss for the U.S. men's national team was alarming and people were going crazy of it, but you got to kind of see a little deeper into it when, you're trying to see what Joni can do, and you're adding him off as a starter, and you're trying to kind of figure things out, and you're going against a Colombia team that I warned y'all, they're red hot, baby. I mean, this is a really good Colombia team. Don't let nobody lie to you. People have Brazil over them as like contenders. I think it goes Argentina, Uruguay, Colombia. And they were just on point that game. But when you try to overreact to a friendly where things just got out of hand, right? I mean, that game between Colombia and the U.S. could very easily end at 3-1 if it was a game where you weren't trying to try new things, if you weren't bringing in guys and modifying things and trying to see what you can get out of a friendly that is supposed to prepare you for a bigger purpose. That bigger purpose being Copa America. So let me just put that out there. I didn't overreact to the 5-1 loss. It was bad. The response, the character wasn't there. Too many individual mistakes, whether it was Vickers or Weah or Matt Turner could have had a couple of those goals. So I look at it that way, right? Individual mistakes, a game that got out of hand, but there were moments where the concepts that Greb was trying to imply You could see them, and that's all I wanted to see. So I didn't overreact to that. They played a much better game against Brazil. They look good. They look physical. They look dangerous. They had a bunch of opportunities. So did Brazil. And now you got redemption from guys like Matt Turner, who was a baller yesterday. I thought Tim Ream was very good, even cheeky at times coming out from the back. Pulisic was dangerous. That free kick shot is beautiful, taking advantage of the wall and where Allison was placed at, where he was, sitting at during that free kick. They did not shy away from a Brazil team that has a lot of talent. I still don't think that they have the collective, cemented play that, other countries or national teams have. But they did it well, man. Joe Scally has been really good, man. People are like, oh, why are you talking about Joe Scally? Look, when you get Lucho Diaz in one game and then you have to go right against Vinny in the next one, that's some tough competition for you to defend. And I thought he did it very well. He minimized Lucho. He contained him as much as he could. And he did the same thing with Vinny. So I think Joe Scally has been definitely one of the highlights for the U.S. men's national team. But I thought it was good. And I thought that all in all, I feel like I won the conversation when it came to not freaking out about the 5-1, because you saw a difference against Brazil. And you saw some of the same concepts, some of the same beliefs kind of come to fruition when you had certain guys, when you were able to adjust certain things. So I thought it was a good couple of friendlies for the U.S. national team, regardless of not getting a win and that scandalous 5-1 loss. Now, when it comes to a 3, that's way different, man. Because, and again, this is people overreacting. They went from wanting to hang Lozano, like, oh my God, this guy cannot coach. We should have got so many other people. And then all of a sudden you have a okay game against Brazil. That, again, it's not the greatest Brazil of all time.
I was going to say, Brazil ain't Brazil, brother.
Brazil of the old, and I'll stick to that. I've been saying that. And also Brazil, the ones that were up 2-0, they downshifted and they started kicking the ball back and moving it around and stuff. So I'm more worried about L3, especially because it seems like Jimmy just doesn't know exactly who his best players are going to be. I feel like the 4-3-3 that Mexico's currently running is too soft down the middle. Both games showed you that when you have good ball progressors, Mexico has no grit in that midfield, man. They really don't, because Charlie's not a great defender, and then they have a huge issue on their left side of defending where Arteaga is at. That guy, man, he cannot defend himself in a golf course. I mean, it's tough. He just looks poorly when it comes to defensive one-on-one markup. So there are a lot of more issues for Mexico. I still believe that they're going to flame out, although the positive result, if you will, even though they lost, a lot of people think it's positive just because they were there. They felt like they should have tied that game. I don't, but I still think they're going to flame out of the group stage in Copa America. So I do believe that they have a lot more issues. People were dying to see Santi start to finish. He was missing. I mean, he was in a milk carton most of the game. I think they're not giving Vega enough minutes. I think that guy is going to be important. Colombian naturalized Mexican Quiñones, I thought it was good offensively, but poor defensively. So there's just a lot more holes in Mexico than there is for the U.S. men's national team.
All right, so Michael Valverde, quick question before we get into cliffhanger. Would the U.S. have fared better with the same approach versus Colombia that they had against Brazil?
See, that's tough to see. I mean, maybe, yes. Perhaps there would have been less goals, but games kind of write their chapters as they go along, right? So if, let's say, there would have been a different approach, there would have been a different concept, different set of players, maybe. But again, I feel like Colombia's style of play, Colombia's ability to not need the ball at all times and be very good in transition, and the moment that they're kind of living at this time, I think Colombia would have still won that game, and you wouldn't have learned anything, right? And that's what the friendlies are about. So to your question, yes, perhaps it would have been a more competitive game if that was the approach, but I still think that Colombia would have won, and Greg Berhalter would have nothing to see and would have had no chance to see where Cardoso was at, or can you play that midfield at any point in time. So you already know what you were getting out of Musa. You already know what you were getting out of Tyler. So you just have to see other players. And I feel like Greg did that.
All right, time for cliffhanger. And we always do this every single week so we can sit here and roll through the matches and see what sticks in Niko's mind. And this week, actually, one of the best matches, to be perfectly honest, might be the first one on the weekend, the one that happens tomorrow night. And it's NYC hosting Crew. And this one, I think, is at Yankee Stadium. So it's in the wink, wink, nudge, nudge regulation pitch in the Bronx. NYC's at a plus 114. Your draws at a plus 256. And Crew are at a plus 225. I imagine that Patrick Schulte will be back in one piece with all of his international duty put to the side. So what do you think with Crew heading to Yankee Stadium on that regulation pitch? Wink, wink, wink.
Yeah, that's a great game, man. I mean, New York City's coming from a beatdown of San Jose, which I guess it is San Jose, but they have finally found some goals. That was what was missing. I feel like Santi Rodriguez is in a whole different level at this time. I think he's found himself as a player, the potential player and the player that you are. They have finally met, and he's just looked different when it comes to not just generating plays, but the leadership aspect, the confidence aspect. I like what Julian Fernandez has brought in. I enjoy how solid and structured they've been defensively. So it's going to be a good one. I feel like you got two very good teams at this moment in time. But I do feel like Columbus is coming with a chip on their shoulder after their inability to go as far as they wanted and get that championship game for MLS in CONCACAF. So I do think that this is one where I would not mind putting my juice boxes on Columbus. And I want to know the over on this one because I feel like that's going to be important.
All right, so let's check the numbers and the over-under. 2.5 is a minus 136. 3.5 is a plus 178. So if you're looking at 2-2, you could get that at a plus 178 on the over.
Ooh, man, yeah. I mean, I like both of those. I really do. I would do Columbus, and I would go over the 3.5. Although it might seem ambitious, I do see this game going that route. Regardless of how good New York City has been defensively, I think Columbus is going to come in guns blazing, and I feel like when they are all out on the attack, there are very, very seldom teams that can hold that back. So I can see this one being a good game for Columbus, and maybe one that is going to challenge some things for this New York City FC team.
All right, couple of matches that I want to focus on because most of these matches are kind of Obviously, Atlanta United hosting Houston. Atlanta United's favored at a plus 108. Benny Ball comes in at a plus 224, and the draws a plus 273 with new coach Rob Valentino, the interim, on the touchline. And Carl Robinson is now an assistant coach. We don't know the tenure, but Carl Robinson was signed this morning officially.
Yeah, man, this is kind of a match of the new head coaches for Atlanta. And, they say in Latin America that a coaching debut is always going to get the result. I don't know if I necessarily buy that, but Houston hasn't necessarily been stellar either. I think that they are a team that is maybe one more attacking piece away, definitely that 9 away from being a really good team. Do I feel like that midfield can give Atlanta some issues, especially maybe exploiting some of the holes that Atlanta has sometimes? Yes. So I can see this as a draw. What's the draw on this?
Plus 273.
Oh, yeah. That's my safe bet on that one. 273 on the draw. And a couple of teams that, especially on the Atlanta side, I'm not really sure what I'm going to get out of these Atlanta teams, regardless of how good the players are. And on the other end, I know what I'm getting out of Benny Ball, and I know what I'm getting out of certain players in Houston. So yeah, man, I like that Atlanta tie, the draw against Houston.
Two other matchups. One, Messi and friends travel to Philadelphia to take on the Union in a game that might bore us to tears, or it could be blowout city for Inter Miami. Philadelphia is a minus 115. Draws a plus 307. Messi and friends on the road a plus 261.
Oh, yeah. Give me that draw at 307. Absolutely. Tata Martino is no gambler. He understands and knows exactly what he has to offer in this game, the absences and what he's going to have to manage. I do believe that this team has the depth to give inconsistent Philadelphia team a run for their money. So I think that a draw, it's fair for this game. I would like to see more out of this Philadelphia team, but it feels like they are at peak and they don't go past like fourth gear, and they just don't have that extra as much as Ura has good moments and Gazdag has good moments, and soon to be going to Europe, Carranza is a monster. And there are some issues for Inter Miami defensively, but I feel like they have enough on the offensive end to make this a draw, probably a 1-1, 2-2 type of game in this one.
All right, so what happens in the 50th anniversary match? Seattle's a minus 147. Minnesota United comes to town. Draw is basically a plus 300. Minnesota United to win a plus 368.
Oh, man. This is such a tough one because I was either going to go draw or I was going to go Minnesota on this one. And the more I try to move around this Rubik's Cube, man, I feel like what Minnesota does well is be hard to break down. They're physical. They're not going to allow you moments of transition. They're well coached, man. They're not brilliant, but they're just so good at what they do. And I feel like their forte goes in line with Seattle's weaknesses. Being able to break down teams that play deep blocks is not and has not been this team's forte. And talking about the Sounders in the past, even more or less now, where it feels like they're a very slow possession team, where it takes so long for plays to develop, when they miss Jordan Morris so many times. I feel like there's going to be some changes here. I feel like the Seattle Sounders, going off of what, just reading in between the lines of what Brian has talked about, I feel like he's going to go again with Jordan Morris up top. Leo Chu's back, right? He's been ready. He did not get used last game, which maybe leads me to believe that he could start this one. So there might be changes in this lineup, might be changes in the tactics. And when you put it all together, I feel like you have a team in Minnesota that is already bought into a concept. They've got results out of it. They seem to have a huge high motor. I feel like they're going to win this game. So as I try to make more excuses.
You're working that Rubik's Cube hard, brother.
Yeah, I got to tell you that I feel like Minnesota is going to end up winning this game at home. And it's a tough one because it's your 50th anniversary. I hope to be wrong. I really do. Maybe this team can put it together. They can use this moment to kind of have a momentum, special moment and shifting moment in this season. But when I look at that back line for Minnesota, I see how physical they can be. I really do think that Seattle's going to end up being in their back heels in this one. And not necessarily because of Minnesota dominating the game or dominating possession, but because they're not going to be able to do what they want to do, and they're just going to get in their head, and Minnesota is going to end up winning this one.
All right. When you come back next week, we'll talk about that one. We'll talk about Benny Ball because on Wednesday, because we're dealing with schedule compression, 3 matches in 8 days for everybody, Wednesday night will be a road game in Houston, so we'll talk about both of those coming back next week. What's going on at Soccer Bar and Pulso Sports where you got a jet because you got another show?
That's right. Soccer Bar is going to be amazing today. If you get a chance, go ahead and check it out. We have Chicho Rango talking to us. We're going to touch base on his season, what it feels like to, at this moment, be better than Messi. I mean, in what, lifetime does a, player get to say that, that they're competing, neck to neck with Messi. And right now he's just the more productive player. And he's leading the MVP race. If we don't want to just take the fans' votes on it, it would just go by soccer analysis. So we're going to get to talk to him. We talked about Colombia, why he's maybe not part of the national team, so it's going to be a good one. Check it out. He's a guy that I believe could be, and at times feels like he should be part of this national team for his style of play, his profile, versatility, and especially for his current production. So that's going to be a good one. In Pulso Sports, you're going to be able to check out some of the things that I just mentioned. We are going to be talking, hopefully today, to Obed Vargas, who has applied to make a one-time switch from representing the U.S. men's national team to the Mexican Federation. That's going to be interesting because it's something that you don't see every day. He's a young player that had declined a U19 call-up, and I didn't think much of it at the time. I feel like I should have now, obviously. So we're going to get to talk to him and ask him, why are you doing this? What's the reason behind it? Does it feel like it's an easier pathway to get into the senior team? Like, why do you make this change now? Because, look, Obed Vargas is extremely talented. He's been part of the youth system for the U.S. men's national team for a long time. I do know their family, and his dad is a proud Mexican, and so is Obed. He grew up watching the U.S. men's national team, and they're very grateful for what the U.S. has given them and provided them, including the U.S. Soccer Federation. But at the end of the day, sometimes those roots are pretty strong, and maybe that's the reason. So check that out. Pulso Sports today. We're going to get a take on why Obed Vargas made the decision to no longer represent the U.S. men's national team, but Mexico instead.
Looking forward to it, brother. I know you got to jump, and thanks for hanging on, because the fourth hold up the light board, and we went some extra time this morning. I really appreciate it. Enjoy that second cup of coffee. We'll catch up with you next week, where we'll have two matches to talk about.
Thank you, my friend. Have a good one. Enjoy it. Enjoy the weekend. Oh, happy Father's Day to everybody. Make sure that we do things for dad. Look, I love moms. They're the greatest thing in the world, but give dad some love, man. As someone who has two wonderful kids and have been a father from a very young age, I really do appreciate my day. I do like to have my steak, my day, things my way. Go ahead and do it for dad, guys, all right? So happy Father's Day to all the wonderful dads out there.
All right, what he said. Be good, my friend. We'll see you next week.